The first time Sophia met Marcus, it was raining. Not the gentle spring shower that poets wax lyrical about, but the harsh, unforgiving downpour of late October in the city van. The kind that finds every seam in your clothing and leaves you chilled to the bone. She stood beneath the meager shelter of a hotel awning, watching raindrops create tiny explosions on the pavement, waiting for her phone to ping with the room number. Just another night. Just another client. Her 6th year in the business had taught her to compartmentalize, to view these encounters as transactions rather than connections. Emotional detachment was a survival skill she'd mastered early on. The message arrived. Room 718. 9 p.m. Sophia checked her reflection in her compact mirror, applied another coat of lipstick Wove, midnight crimson, her signature shade of, and entered the hotel. The lobby was all polished marble and understated luxury, the kind of place that catered to business travelers with expense accounts. The security guard gave her a cursory glance but said nothing. She looked the part in her tailored black dress and subtle jewelry, more executive's dinner date than what she actually was. The elevator ascended smoothly to the 7th floor. Sophia used these moments to shift her mindset, to become the fantasy that clients paid for. Not Sophia Barnes from a small town in Pennsylvania who had once dreamed of becoming a photographer, but Sophie, the attentive, sensual woman who made men feel desired, important, understood. Room 718 was at the end of the hallway. She knocked twice, softly, professional but not intrusive. The man who opened the door wasn't what she expected. Most of her clients were older, executives with thinning hair and expanding waistlines, men whose power in the boardroom didn't translate to confidence in the bedroom. This man was younger, mid-30s perhaps with dark hair slightly damp from a recent shower and eyes that assessed her with quiet intelligence. "Sophie?" he asked, his voice deeper than she'd anticipated. "Yes," she replied with a practiced smile, "and you must be Marcus." He stepped aside to let her enter. The room was neat, almost untouched, except for a laptop on the desk and a glass of what appeared to be whiskey beside it. No scattered clothing. No signs of the comfortable messiness people often allow themselves in hotel rooms. "Would you like a drink?" he offered, gesturing toward the minibar. "White wine, if they have it," she answered, setting her purse down on a chair. As Marcus prepared her drink, Sophia took the opportunity to observe him more carefully. He moved with a contained precision, a man who thought before he acted. His clothes dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt were expensive but understated. A wedding ring was conspicuously absent, though that meant little in her experience. "Here you are," he said, handing her a glass. Their fingers brushed briefly during the exchange then, a moment of contact that she registered professionally, noting the absence of awkwardness or eagerness in his touch. "Thank you." She took a small sip, maintaining eye contact over the rim of the glass. "So, Marcus, what brings you to the city?" It was a standard opening, giving clients the comfort of ordinary conversation before transitioning to more intimate matters. "Work," he answered, settling into the armchair across from where she stood. "I'm helping establish a new branch office here, commercial real estate development." Sophia nodded, preparing to ask appropriate follow-up questions that would help him feel at ease, but he surprised her by continuing. "But that's not particularly interesting, is it? You must hear endless variations of 'I'm here on business' from men in hotel rooms." His directness caught her off guard. "It's part of the ritual," she acknowledged with a small smile. "But I don't mind." "What would you rather talk about?" he asked, studying her with a gaze that felt more curious than predatory. The question was unusual enough to make her pause. Clients rarely asked for her preferences about anything, let alone conversation topics. "Books," she said before she could censor herself. "I've been reading a lot of early 20th century female authors lately, rediscovering voices that were overlooked in their time." Marcus's expression shifted to genuine interest. Like Nella Larson? Or perhaps Zora Neale Hurston? Now it was Sophia's turn to look surprised. "Yes, exactly. I just finished Their Eyes Were Watching God last week." "One of my favorites," he said, taking a sip of his whiskey. "Hurston has this extraordinary ability to capture dialect without reducing her characters to stereotypes." You feel the rhythms of their speech, the culture behind the words. For a moment, Sophia forgot why she was there, drawn into a conversation she might have had at a literary event or coffee shop. Then reality reasserted itself, and she mentally recalibrated. This was still work. Maybe Marcus wanted the fantasy of intellectual connection before physical intimacy. It's refreshing to meet someone who appreciates her work, she said, moving toward him with practiced grace. But I'm sure you didn't request my company to discuss literature all evening. Marcus didn't reach for her as she expected. Instead, he gestured to the chair beside him. Actually, I'd enjoy hearing more about what you're reading, if you don't mind. Sophia hesitated, then sat, crossing her legs and angling her body toward him. Professional habits even in this unusual scenario. You're not what I expected, she admitted. What did you expect? She considered her words carefully. Most men have specific expectations when they arrange to meet me. They know exactly what they want. And you think I don't? There was amusement in his voice, but not unkindness. I think you're different, she replied honestly, but I'm not sure how yet. Marcus nodded, accepting this assessment. I requested you specifically, you know. Your agency described you as intelligent and well-read, someone who could provide stimulating conversation as well as other services. And is that what you're looking for, conversation? For tonight, yes. He leaned forward slightly. I travel frequently for work. Hotel rooms get lonely. Sometimes what I miss most isn't physical intimacy, but genuine human connection. Sophia had heard similar lines before, usually as preamble to clients wanting to enact relationship fantasies. But something in Marcus's manner felt different. Less performative, more sincere. I'm still charging my full rate, she said, testing him. He smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. I would expect nothing less. Your time is valuable regardless of how we spend it. And so began the strangest evening of Sophia's professional life. For 3 hours, they talked about books, films, travel, art. Marcus asked questions and actually listened to her answers, revealing a quick mind and dry humor that drew her out more than she intended. He poured her a second glass of wine, then a third, never pushing for anything beyond conversation. When their time was up, Sophia felt oddly reluctant to leave. I should be going, she said, gathering her purse. Marcus walked her to the door. Thank you for your company, he said, handing her an envelope that she knew contained her payment. It was genuinely refreshing. It was unexpected, she replied honestly, but nice. As she rode the elevator down to the lobby, Sophia tried to make sense of the evening. In 6 years of sex work, she'd encountered all types of men with all manner of requests, but never one who paid her full rate just to talk. It was disorienting to be seen as a person rather than a fantasy or service provider. She assumed it was a one-time anomaly. Some clients had unusual first meetings. Perhaps Marcus had been nervous or testing the waters before requesting more typical services next time. But there probably wouldn't be a next time. Men like him, men who seemed to see beyond her professional persona, rarely called twice. They either got what they wanted or realized that genuine connection couldn't be purchased by the hour. So when her agency contacted her 2 weeks later saying Marcus had requested her again, Sophia was genuinely surprised. She accepted the booking with a mixture of curiosity and professional caution. The second meeting would reveal his true expectations, she reasoned. Their second encounter unfolded much like the first thoughtful conversation over drinks in his hotel room. No expectations of physical intimacy. The third meeting followed the same pattern, though this time they ordered room service and discussed a novel they'd both coincidentally been reading. By their fourth meeting, Sophia found herself in the dangerous territory of anticipation. She looked forward to seeing Marcus, to the intellectual stimulation and attention he provided. It was precisely the kind of emotional engagement she had trained herself to avoid. You never talk about yourself, she observed during their fifth meeting, a rainy December evening in a different hotel. I know your thoughts on Steinbeck versus Hemingway, but nothing about your life outside these hotel rooms. Marcus swirled the whiskey in his glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. Would you believe me if I said my life isn't very interesting? No, Sophia replied with a small smile. I wouldn't. He chuckled, a warm sound that had become familiar to her. Fair enough. What would you like to know? The basics. Where you're from, if you have family, why you travel so much, why you keep requesting me when we never do what men typically request escorts for. The last question slipped out before she could censor it. Marcus looked at her thoughtfully before answering. I grew up in Seattle, studied architecture, but ended up in real estate development instead. I travel because the company is expanding rapidly and I oversee new projects. He paused. As for your last question, I enjoy your company, Sophie. You're intelligent, thoughtful, and I find our conversations more valuable than temporary physical gratification. Sophie. The name jarred her slightly. It wasn't her real name, but in these meetings with Marcus, she'd begun to feel more like Sophia than Sofiev, more like herself than the persona she adopted for clients. But you could find intelligent conversation without paying for it, she pointed out. There must be women in your regular life who would be happy to discuss Hurston and Steinbeck with you. Something shifted in his expression of a shadow of sadness or perhaps resignation. Perhaps. But this arrangement has its advantages. Clarity, boundaries, no expectations beyond our agreed time. It was the most revealing thing he'd said, and Sophia sensed there was more beneath the surface laugh, some pain or complication he wasn't sharing. But she didn't press. They had their unspoken rules, and personal histories seemed to fall outside the boundaries they'd established. Instead, she redirected the conversation to safer ground phys, a recent exhibit at the Modern Art Museum that they'd both visited independently. The moment passed, but Sophia found herself thinking about it later, wondering what experiences had led Marcus to prefer the controlled intimacy of paid companionship over traditional relationships. In January, their routine shifted slightly. Marcus invited her to dinner at an upscale restaurant before returning to his hotel for their usual conversation. Sitting across from him in public, Sophia was acutely aware of how this blurred the lines of their arrangement. To anyone observing them, they would appear to be a couple or perhaps business associates, normal people enjoying a normal evening together. Is this okay? Marcus asked, noticing her scanning the restaurant. If you're uncomfortable being seen in public with a client, we can go back to the hotel. It's fine, she assured him. Just different. Different bad? She considered the question. No, just less defined. Marcus nodded, understanding what she meant without requiring elaboration. That was one of the things Sophia had come to appreciate about him, his emotional intelligence, his ability to read between the lines of what she said. Over dinner, their conversation flowed as easily as it did in the privacy of hotel rooms. Marcus told her about a challenging project he was working on, the transformation of an abandoned factory into mixed-use space for artists and entrepreneurs. Sophia shared her thoughts on a photography exhibition she'd recently viewed, finding herself gesturing animatedly as she described the play of light and shadow in the black and white images. You know a lot about photography, Marcus observed. Sophia hesitated, then decided on honesty. I studied it in college. For a while, it was what I wanted to do professionally. What changed? The question was gentle, without judgment, but it still brushed against the boundaries Sophia maintained between her professional and personal identities. Life, she answered with a slight shrug. Circumstances. Choices. Marcus accepted this vague response without pressing further. Do you still take photographs? Sometimes, not as often as I'd like. I'd love to see your work sometime, he said, then immediately added, but only if you're comfortable sharing it. The request stirred something in Sophia of pleasure at his interest mixed with the wariness of revealing too much of herself to a client, even one as unusual as Marcus. Maybe someday, she replied noncommittally. After dinner, they walked back to his hotel through streets glistening with recent rain. Marcus kept a respectful distance between them, but Sophia found herself aware of his presence in a way that felt less professional and more personal than she was comfortable with. In his room, their usual pattern resumed one: drinks, conversation, the easy exchange of ideas and observations. But something had shifted subtly, a new awareness humming beneath their intellectual connection. When their time was up, Marcus walked her to the door as always. I'm going to be away for a few weeks, he said. A project in Chicago needs my attention, but I'd like to see you when I return if you're available. I'll be here, Sophia replied, then felt a flutter of unease at how eager the response sounded. Marcus seemed to hesitate, then reached out slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted. His fingers brushed her cheek in a gesture so gentle it made her breath catch. "Take care, Sophie," he said softly. She left feeling unsettled, aware that the boundaries she'd so carefully maintained were beginning to blur. Marcus was still a client. He paid for her time. Their relationship existed within the framework of a business transaction. Yet their connection had evolved into something that didn't fit neatly within those parameters. During the weeks of Marcus's absence, Sophia continued her work with other clients, but found herself comparing them unfavorably to him. Their conversations seemed shallow, their interests in her performative rather than genuine. She caught herself looking forward to his return, with an anticipation that warned of dangerous emotional territory. When her agency called to say Marcus had requested her for the evening after his return to the city, Sophia accepted immediately, then spent an unusual amount of time preparing for the meeting while selecting a dress she knew complemented her eyes, refreshing her memory about books they'd discussed, even purchasing a small, flat package that she tucked into her purse with uncharacteristic nervousness. This time, Marcus greeted her with a warmth that suggested he'd missed their conversations as much as she had. They fell easily back into their rhythm, discussing his Chicago project and a novel she'd read during his absence. The evening had the comfortable quality of friends reuniting, layered with an undercurrent of attraction neither of them acknowledged directly. Near the end of their time together, Sophia finally gathered her courage and removed the package from her purse. "I brought you something," she said, feeling oddly vulnerable. "It's nothing significant, just something that made me think of our conversations." Marcus accepted the package with evident surprise. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she replied simply. He unwrapped it carefully to reveal a slender volume of poetry by Langston Hughes. First edition, he noted with appreciation, examining the book with gentle hands. "This is a treasure, Sophie. Thank you." "I found it in a used bookstore," she explained. "I remembered you mentioning how much his work influenced your understanding of the Harlem Renaissance." Marcus looked up at her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret as pleasure, mixed with something more complex. "The fact that you remembered that conversation, it means a lot." An uncomfortable realization settled over Sophia. She was breaking her own cardinal rule. Never get emotionally invested in a client, no matter how appealing or different they seemed. The careful professional distance she'd maintained for years was eroding rapidly with Marcus, and the small gift was both symptom and catalyst of that dangerous shift. "I should go," she said abruptly, rising from her seat. "It's getting late." Marcus stood as well, still holding the book. "Of course, I've kept you longer than our arranged time. I apologize." "No need to apologize," Sophia assured him, gathering her things. "I enjoy our conversations." At the door, Marcus paused. "Sophie, may I ask you something personal?" Warning bells sounded in Sophia's mind, but she nodded cautiously. "Is Sophie your real name?" The question caught her off guard. Clients rarely asked, understanding implicitly that the women they hired often used professional aliases. "No," she admitted after a moment. "It's not." Marcus nodded, accepting this without pressing for her real name. "I thought so." Sometimes when you're deeply engaged in conversation, you have a slight delay before responding to items as if you're remembering which name to answer to. His observation was so perceptive it unnerved her. "It's safer this way," she said simply. "I understand," he replied. "Thank you for the book. It's a thoughtful gift." Sophia left feeling strangely exposed, as if Marcus had seen through the careful facade she maintained with clients. His question about her name had crossed an unspoken boundary, highlighting the fundamental deception at the heart of their relationship web. She wasn't Sophie, and their connection, however intellectually stimulating, was still based on a financial transaction. The next morning, Sophia woke to a text message from her agency. Marcus had left an envelope for her. When she picked it up later that day, she found not only her payment for the previous evening, but a small package as well. Inside was a book of photographs by Vivian Mayer, a street photographer whose work had been discovered and published posthumously. A note accompanied the book. Your interest in photography deserves nurturing. Perhaps this will inspire you to pick up your camera again. Sophia stared at the gift, conflicting emotions churning within her. The thoughtfulness of it touched her deeply, but it also represented another step across the line that separated professional relationships from personal ones. Marcus wasn't just paying for her time anymore. He was engaging with her as a person with dreams and interests beyond their arranged meetings. For the next 2 months, their relationship continued in this ambiguous spacewive, still technically a business arrangement, but infused with an intimacy and mutual interest that defied easy categorization. They never crossed the physical boundary into sexual territory, though the possibility hummed beneath their interactions, acknowledged but not acted upon. Sophia found herself sharing more with Marcus than she had with anyone in years. Her childhood in small-town Pennsylvania, her college years studying photography, even oblique references to the financial crisis that had derailed her plans and eventually led her to sex work. She never explained exactly what she did besides being an escort, and Marcus never asked for clarification, seeming content with whatever parts of herself she was willing to reveal. In turn, he opened up about his own life, his divorce 5 years earlier, his complicated relationship with his father, his ambivalence about his career despite his success in it. Their conversations deepened, creating a connection that felt increasingly real despite its unusual context. Then came the evening that changed everything. Marcus had requested her for dinner at a small, intimate restaurant they'd visited once before. Throughout the meal, Sophia noticed he seemed distracted, less engaged than usual in their conversation. "Is everything all right?" she finally asked as they lingered over dessert. Marcus set down his fork, his expression serious. "I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how to approach it." Sophia's mind immediately conjured worst-case scenarios. He was ending their arrangement, or perhaps finally revealing the hidden agenda behind his unusual approach to their relationship. "Just say it," she suggested, bracing herself. Marcus took a deep breath. "I've been offered a permanent position here, Rev. No more traveling, no more temporary assignments. I'd be overseeing all East Coast development from the office in this city." "That's wonderful," Sophia said, genuinely pleased for him but confused by his seriousness. "Isn't it what you wanted?" "It is," he acknowledged, "but it changes things." He met her eyes directly, "including what's possible between us." The implication hung in the air between them. Sophia's heart raced, but her professional instincts urged caution. "Marcus," she began carefully, "what exactly are you suggesting?" "I'd like to see you outside of our current arrangement," he said, each word deliberate. "Not as a client, not with payment involved, just as myself, getting to know you, the real you, not Sophie." Sophia felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. She had considered many possible outcomes to their unusual relationship, but this flea's a direct invitation to step beyond the transactional framework still caught her unprepared. "You don't even know my real name," she pointed out, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'd like to learn it," he replied simply. "If you're willing to tell me." The possibility he offered was both tempting and terrifying. In the years since she'd entered sex work, Sophia had kept her professional life strictly separate from her personal identity. The few relationships she'd attempted had collapsed under the weight of deception or prejudice once her occupation was revealed. And here was Marcus, knowing what she did but asking to know her anyway. "I need time to think about this," she said finally. Marcus nodded, respecting her hesitation. "Of course, there's no pressure, and whatever you decide won't change our current arrangement if you want to continue it." They finished dinner in a state of suspended tension, their usual easy conversation replaced by careful small talk and significant silences. When Marcus walked her to the taxi stand afterwards, he didn't attempt to persuade her further. "Take all the time you need," he said gently. "I'll respect whatever decision you make." For the next week, Sophia grappled with Marcus's proposition. The professional in her recognized all the red flags. Few clients who claimed to fall in love with escorts rarely understood the reality of who they were outside the fantasy they paid for. Yet Marcus had never seemed interested in the typical escort fantasy. From their first meeting, he had engaged with her mind more than her body, had seemed to see past her professional persona to something more authentic beneath. She discussed the situation with her therapist, Dr. Rivera, who had helped her navigate the psychological complexities of sex work for the past 4 years. "What's holding you back?" Dr. Rivera asked after Sophia explained Marcus's offer. "Is it fear that he won't accept the real you, or fear that he will?" The question struck uncomfortably close to home. "Both, I suppose," Sophia admitted. "If I let him see the real me, and he rejects that, it reinforces every fear I have about being fundamentally unlovable because of what I do. But if he accepts me completely, that's terrifying in a different way." "Because it would require you to accept yourself," Dr. Rivera suggested gently. Sophia nodded, realizing the truth in those words. Despite her outward confidence, part of her had internalized society's judgment of her profession, had come to believe that her work made her unsuitable for genuine connection or love. "There's also the practical aspect," she added. "Marcus is established in his career. I'm still working as an escort. Even if he accepts that initially, the reality of dating someone in my profession would eventually create problems." "That's a valid concern," Dr. Rivera acknowledged, "but it's also a separate issue from whether you want to pursue a relationship with him. One is about compatibility and practical considerations. The other is about your willingness to be vulnerable and authentic with someone who has shown interest in the real you." After their session, Sophia walked through the city for hours, weighing her options. By evening, she had made her decision. She texted Marcus, "Can we meet tomorrow?" "Not as a professional arrangement. I'd like to talk." His response came quickly. "Yes. Name the place and time. I'll be there." They met at a small cafe in a neighborhood, far from the hotels where they usually encountered each other. Sophia arrived early, selecting a table in the corner where they could talk privately. She had dressed differently than for their previous meetings. Wow's jeans, a simple sweater, minimal makeup. Not Sophie the escort, but herself. When Marcus walked in, his eyes found her immediately, despite her changed appearance. As he approached, Sophia felt a flutter of nervousness, unlike anything she'd experienced in years. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, taking the seat across from her. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began after they'd ordered coffee, "about seeing each other outside our arrangement." Marcus nodded, waiting for her to continue. Sophia took a deep breath. "Before I give you my answer, there are things you need to understand. The reality of my life is complicated. I'm not just an escort in the glamorous sense people sometimes imagine. I have sex with men for money. That's the unvarnished truth of what I do." She watched his face carefully as she spoke, looking for signs of discomfort or judgment. Marcus maintained eye contact, his expression serious but not repulsed. "I know what your profession entails," he said quietly. "I'm not naive about that. Knowing it intellectually is different from dealing with it emotionally," Sophia countered. "Could you really be with someone who continues to do this work?" "Because I'm not in a position to stop right now. I have financial obligations, educational debt. This is how I support myself." Marcus considered her words before responding. "I won't pretend it would be simple or easy, but I'm not asking you to change your life for me. I'm asking for a chance to get to know the real you, to see if what I feel for you can grow into something meaningful outside the context where we met." His honesty touched her. There was no false promise that her work wouldn't matter, no pressure to change for his comfort, just an acknowledgement of reality and a willingness to navigate it together. "My name is Sophia," she said finally. "Not Sophie. Sophia Barnes." A smile spread across Marcus's face. Not triumphant, but gently pleased. "It suits you better than Sophie. Thank you for trusting me with that." "I'm not promising anything," she cautioned. "Just a possibility. The chance to see what this is outside the framework we've been operating in. That's all I'm asking for," Marcus assured her. "A beginning, not a guarantee." They spent the next 2 hours talking more openly than they had before, without the invisible barrier of client and provider between them. Marcus shared more about his new position, his hopes for putting down roots after years of constant travel. Sophia told him about her photography, her dream of returning to it professionally someday. When they finally parted, Marcus didn't try to kiss her, didn't push for more than she had offered. "I'd like to see you again," he said simply. "Maybe you could show me some of your photographs next time." "I'd like that," Sophia replied, surprised to find she genuinely meant it. The transition from paid companionship to dating was neither simple nor straightforward. They agreed that Sophia would no longer be available to Marcus through her agency. That boundary, at least, needed to be clear. But other aspects of their relationship remained in flux, both of them learning to interact without the structure and expectations that had previously defined their connection. Their first official date was to a photography exhibition at a small gallery. Sophia felt strangely vulnerable walking beside Marcus in this new context, hyper-aware of the shift in dynamics between them. No longer was her time being purchased. Now they were simply two people choosing to be together, with all the uncertainty that entailed. "It's strange, isn't it?" Marcus observed as they studied a series of urban landscapes. "Being here as whatever we are now." "Dating," Sophia supplied, the word feeling foreign on her tongue when applied to them. "At least, I think that's what people would call this." He smiled. "Dating, then. Though it feels inadequate to describe what's between us." She knew what he meant. Their relationship had developed in reverse of intimate conversations and emotional connection first, only now moving into the conventional early stages of romance. They knew each other's thoughts on literature and art, had shared personal histories and vulnerabilities, yet had never held hands outside a professional goodbye, had never kissed. "We're writing our own rules," Sophia said. "There's no template for this." As weeks passed, they continued exploring this uncharted territory together. Sophia maintained her professional life. She had clients to see, bills to pay, but carved out time for Marcus that existed completely separate from that world. She showed him her photographs, took him to her favorite hidden spots in the city, gradually revealed more of herself than she had allowed anyone to see in years. Marcus never pressured her about her work, never asked for details, but didn't shy away from the reality of it either. When she had to cancel plans because of a client booking, he accepted it without question or guilt. When she mentioned saving for photography equipment, he listened without offering to buy it for her, respecting her independence. The physical aspect of their relationship developed slowly, deliberately. Their first kiss came nearly a month after they began dating Bay, a tentative moment on her doorstep that carried none of the practiced seduction Sophia employed professionally, but rather the genuine nervousness of someone risking their heart. "I've been wanting to do that for a very long time," Marcus admitted afterward, his forehead resting against hers. "Even back when I was Sophie?" she asked, curious about when his feelings had shifted from appreciation to attraction. "Even then," he confirmed. "But I didn't want to be just another man who thought he could buy that from you." His answer cemented something Sophia had begun to believe about Marcus, that he saw her completely, both the escort and the woman behind that role, and valued her integrity enough to wait until she offered herself freely. As their relationship deepened, Sophia found herself at a crossroads professionally. The emotional compartmentalization that had protected her for years became increasingly difficult to maintain. Being with clients after spending time with Marcus felt jarring. The contrast between transactional intimacy and genuine connection more stark than ever before. In their 4th month of dating, Sophia raised the subject with Marcus during a quiet evening at his apartment. "I'm thinking about leaving the business," she said, watching his expression carefully. "Not immediately, but starting to transition out." Marcus set down his wineglass, giving her his full attention. "Because of us?" "Partly," she admitted, "but also for me. It was never meant to be permanent. I've been saving, thinking about what comes next. Maybe returning to school to finish my photography degree, or trying to build a portfolio for commercial work." "Whatever you decide, I support you," Marcus said. "But I don't want you to change your life because you think I expect it." "I know," Sophia assured him. "That's one of the reasons I trust this was. You've never tried to save me or change me. You've just seen me. All of me, not just the parts that are easy to accept. Marcus reached for her hand, his touch gentle. Because all of you is worth seeing, Sophia. The complexity is part of what makes you who you are. In that moment, looking at their intertwined fingers, Sophia recognized what had been growing between them for months, perhaps even from their first unusual meeting in a hotel room, where a client had wanted conversation instead of sex. I love you, she said, the words emerging with surprising ease. I wasn't looking for this. I didn't think it was possible, given my life. But I love you. Marcus's eyes softened, his hand tightening around hers. I love you too. Not despite who you are or what you do, but including all of it, TMG, because it's part of what made you the woman sitting here with me now. It wasn't a conventional love story. There would be challenges ahead of Sophia's transition from sex work to whatever came next. The inevitable complications of building a relationship with such an unorthodox beginning. The judgments they might face from others who couldn't understand their connection. But as Marcus pulled her close, his kiss carrying all the tenderness and acceptance she had never dared to hope for, Sophia knew that some connections transcended conventional boundaries. Their story had begun as a transaction of time and companionship exchanged for money of, but had evolved into something neither of them could have anticipated. A love built on genuine seeing, on the radical acceptance of another person exactly as they are.